Hey, so in this video, I want to talk about 5 toxic signs that your parents ruined your life, affected your ability to form healthy relationships in adulthood, and also ruined your ability to enjoy success later in life. Number 1, you never felt close to your parents growing up. There was always a distance or an awkwardness when you were around your parents for as long as you can remember. This distance made you feel like an outcast in the family. This often happens when a child is excluded or when a parent makes the child feel unwelcome. And maybe the parent's irritated by the child's presence. Perhaps they didn't even want to have children in the first place. Believe it or not all parents actually want to have children. Often it's a mistake. Often they don't think about it. Then the child comes along and they instantly regret that loss of freedom and they take it out on the child, and this can be very traumatic for the child, and it can cause a toxic relationship to form. I've spoken to countless people who've grown up with parents who they say they never really had a relationship when they were growing up. The parents were always absent or distant or not really wanting them around. They didn't feel welcome, and then as they grow up, feels normal for them to grow up and not have their parents be a part of their life, and they often grow up separately, or they move away and they don't see their parents again. I know people who move out of their homes 18 years old, they don't see their parents for 20 years, 30 years, sometimes never. Sometimes that's the way it goes. But it does leave a scar because you don't have that close bond, you don't have that support system, you don't have that family network, and you are completely self-reliant. It can stop you from forming bonds later in life. It can stop you from forming healthy relationships because you don't have a good role model on how to function in a relationship. Number 2, you've got a domineering father. Sometimes this happens when you have a father who tries to dominate you and lord it over you. He tries to be competitive with you, especially common in relationships between fathers and sons. Some men become competitive with their sons, which is ridiculous because let's face it, it's just a kid, it's a child. And these children grow up having this competitive relationship with their father, and of course they can never win because they're just children. And the fathers always try to crush them and beat them and look down on them and have these tiny, petty, small victories. A great example of this would be where the father makes jokes at the child's expense, tries to humiliate the child. When the child loses his cool, the father finds it hysterical, finds it amusing because he's gained a small victory, doesn't think about the effect that this has on the child growing up and how it's going to damage the child's self-confidence and self-worth. A lot of men who are very insecure, men who are beaten down at work, perhaps they're being disrespected by their boss, their subordinates, their employees, their social network, they come home and they take it out on their child because their ego is damaged. When the ego is damaged, they look to pump themselves up again by getting these petty little victories. And you'll find that sometimes fathers will do this with their children. They will try to reinflate their egos by being competitive with their child in a game that they know they will always win. This is a huge sign of insecurity in a father, but it leads to long-term damaging effects in the child. Number 3, you've got an overly attached mother, a mother who doesn't want you to leave the house, a mother who wants you to be constantly around them for emotional support. You will find this in situations where as you grow older, your mother doesn't want you to become friends with anyone else. They don't want you to date other people because they're scared of losing you. They always want to be the number one person in your life, and they become very protective and they try to shield you. Unfortunately, this has the adverse effect of damaging your future relationships. It turns a lot of men into nice guys because they're always worried about upsetting mother, right? A little bit like Norman Bates in Psycho. They become preoccupied with their mothers and pleasing them and supplicating to them, which is, of course, it's going to have a big impact going forward in the future. So be aware that if you've got an overly attached mother, this can form into a very toxic, unhealthy relationship. There comes a point in time in any relationship with your parents where you have to break apart and you have to go your separate way. It's a part of growing and maturing. But if you don't do that, then it's very easy to be codependent. And this can lead to some trouble later in life in terms of your career, especially in terms of forming proper relationships with other people. Overly attached mothers will often use emotional blackmail to try to keep you in check. They'll try to make you feel guilty for not spending time with them. They'll try to play manipulative games to keep you around, just like manipulative women, girlfriends, wives. Some mothers can be the same. They can be just as toxic and just as damaging. Mothers should love you and let you live your life and be happy. A lot of mothers, of course, are like that, but not all mothers. So just be aware, if your mother's being manipulative, she's trying to play emotional games, then you need to cut that string. Number 4, anxiety was prevalent in your childhood, and it's one of your earliest emotions and memories. I had a good friend of mine who told me that ever since he was about 4 years old, he was terrified of speaking up in class. He was terrified of speaking to people. And when he went into psychotherapy, he had these flashbacks to some of his earliest memories. And some of his earliest memories were him being pushed around, shouted at, and screamed at by his parents, particularly his father. He used to blast him for the smallest infraction. This made him very scared to speak up, very scared to speak his mind, and this carried over into his social life, into his personal relationships, because he was terrified of making people angry. He was terrified of making people upset, and he said one of the earliest memories that he had was a constant sense of anxiety in his life. This isn't to say that his father wanted to crush his confidence and to destroy his life in his future, but it had a devastating impact on his life going forward. He wasn't able to confront people. He wasn't able to have any form of conflict without backing down. He wasn't able to speak up even as he got older. And these scars can last a lifetime. So this is the effect of being in a toxic relationship with a toxic parent. It can leave scars that last for the rest of your life. The famous psychologist Sigmund Freud said that most men want to marry their mothers and murder their fathers. I think that's half true. I think a lot of men want to eradicate their fathers and get rid of them completely because of the damage that was done to them in childhood. They had a very unhealthy relationship and they want to cut their fathers out of their lives. This actually happens more than you think. A lot of men don't talk about it. A lot of men don't bring it up, or it's hard for them to talk about it and bring it up. But it's a very, very common theme that I deal with when I do psychotherapy. Number 5, your parents crush your confidence and self-worth. A lot of parents try to live vicariously through their children. They will try to make their child as successful as possible. And if the child doesn't live up to expectations, whether it's academic expectations, sports achievements, they will punish the child because they are upset with a child's lack of achievement. Now, these parents attach their own self-worth to the child. They're trying to compensate for how they failed in life. I remember when I used to play tennis competitively as a teenager, I would go to tournaments, and I remember one dad screaming at my opponent from the very beginning of the match, standing behind him on the other side of the fence, and the kid was crying, and I knew instantly that I'd won the match. When I won the first set, the father came through the gate, grabbed his son by the collar, pushed him up against the fence, and screamed at him for underperforming. And I felt sorry for the kid, of course. The kid didn't really want to play tennis. It was the father's dream, but the father was also crushing his child's self-confidence. And this is something which is tragic, because as a child grows up later in life, of course, he's going to deal with a lot of issues. There's going to be a lot of resentment. He's going to have a lot of insecurity naturally. He's going to probably be a nice guy because he's scared to upset people or confront people, and he's always going to try to please people. So this is another type of toxic relationship. A lot of people, when they grow up, they can become very frustrated because when you try to work on your problems in life, whether it's through therapy or any kind of self-work, you can get to a point where you think that you've almost healed yourself, but you'll probably find that you haven't. Those scars run deep. You can never entirely fix them or eradicate them or get rid of them completely, and this can lead to a lot of resentment. Now, this doesn't mean that you can completely eradicate all of the damage that was done. You can improve your life, of course, and it can be fuel to improve your life. You can prove people wrong. You can prove your parents wrong. They told you you would never amount to anything. They told you you would never be successful. You can prove all of these people wrong, and this can be great fuel and energy to take into your life and improve on the legacy that your parents left you.